basically just waking up in a Walmart parking lot. Is it not? Hey, it's Kelsey, and welcome back to Coffee and Cameras, your cozy corner on the internet where we talk all things photography. Today, we're going to talk about touring. So for those who don't know me, I am a music photographer and merch manager who has toured for the last few years, and I think there are a lot of misconceptions and illusions of what tour actually is. Like, what is it like to travel from city to city with a band? And I really want to talk about that because a lot of people don't realize that tour is just, it's a job at the end of the day. And it's not as it's fun and I love it, but it's not as glamorous as I think most people see it as. So to start, I kind of want to talk about there are van tours and there are bus tours because I do think both are very different. I've done both. I started in a van and I moved my way up to a bus, and I will say bus tours are amazing and so much better, but I would not change a thing about the van tours I've done because I think there are so many memories there that I just wouldn't have without them. So it really depends on the tour, but my first van tour, we were an opening band. We were opening for Simple Plan, who were in a bus. So while they drove overnight, which I will get more into when I talk about bus tours, but when they drove overnight, we had to wake up early and drive during the day because obviously we have to sleep. So we were spending most of our days just driving all day and then sleeping in one hotel room every night. We would share one hotel room. So yes, some of us were sleeping on the floor. And I believe it was me, two other crew members in the band. So that would have been 7 people, which is insane. And yes, we were sneaking into hotels because I think the max is 4 for a room. Yeah, not too sure. As long as Best Western doesn't see this, I think we're okay. Now, I've also done van tours where we couldn't even afford hotels, so we were sleeping in 24-hour Walmart parking lots, or sometimes we'd do camping. I know one tour we brought a tent, so some of us would sleep on the benches while other people would pitch a tent and camp. I have some really good memories from the camping days, and we're doing a summer tour. Camping was actually so fun, and honestly, I kind of loved the camping because I grew up like I said, I grew up in a small town, so we went camping a lot, so it kind of just felt like cozy. Like, tour is basically just glamorized camping. It honestly is. And you're just stuck with a bunch of people that you can't escape from for like a month. So yeah, when you're traveling in a van, you can kind of kiss any sense of privacy goodbye. Like, you're actually lucky if you do get your own bench. Sometimes you have a trailer, but all your gear and suitcases are going to be shoved in the back. You're kind of all just on top of each other, to be honest. Like, there really is no a sense of space. On the plus side of that, though, is you do get to know each other really well, and you do get to see a lot of the countries because you're doing the drives yourself. Now, van tours usually mean you are either the opening band or you're doing a smaller tour and you have less production. So your load-in times are usually later. So usually you're just kind of driving all day, and load-in's usually around like 2 to 5 p.m., really depending on the tour. You load in, you do the show, you go to your one hotel room, and then you wake up the next morning and you drive to the next city and you do it again. Now, once you upgrade to bus tours, I wouldn't exactly say you have privacy because you are still living on basically a motorhome with 12 people. So privacy is still not exactly an option, but you do get a bunk. And with that bunk is a curtain. And when that curtain closes, nobody is allowed to disturb you unless it's an emergency. So there is the little sense of privacy in that way. And personally, I love my little coffin bunk. I sleep so well in a moving bus. I am right at home. However, sometimes because there's not a lot of space, you will have a bunch of stuff shoved in your bunk. My bunk ended up being my closet at the end of the day. Like, I was determined on my last tour. I was like, I am not going to shove everything at my feet. And it was like 3 days in. I'm like, yeah, I have my makeup bag back there. I've got like a small bag of my clothes for the next couple of days because your big suitcases go underneath the bus, so you can't bring those on. At one point I had like a safe in there with some merch cash in it. I'm like, why am I living like this? Like there's some people that will go in and they will make their bunks look so cute with the lights, and like they've got all their fancy like charger extensions. They can plug in all their gadgets and like everything's cute. They'll tape like a mount on the ceiling so they can watch movies. Mine is just like, there's 3 water bottles by my head and a bunch of clothes shoved at the back. And me, who was 5'11", by the way, so I'm not even short, just squished in between the two. So that's just my own personal way of living in a bunk. You can be better than me. You can be the people that are organized. I just find I sleep in there and I go and hide in there when I just want to like have some privacy, but I don't really spend too much time there otherwise. Actually, now that we're talking about that, let's talk about some bus rules. Even if you've toured, if you've never done like a bus tour, there's some fun rules that you guys need to know. So number one, and this is a fun one, no pooping on the bus. There, I said it, you cannot poop on the bus. Now, I do not know this from experience, so do not come at me, but it is a general rule that everybody going onto it is told. Basically, without getting into the gross details, the pipes on the bus cannot handle anything but liquid going down. And unfortunately, this also means, especially for us ladies, you cannot flush toilet paper down the toilet as well. If you have a good bus driver, they will clean the garbage out regularly, but it can just start to smell in there, as it will, because you're not flushing everything you should be flushing down. So it's very glamorous, I know. And on top of that, another rule, you cannot drink bus water. I mean, technically you could, but you are going to risk being sick. A bus's water station, water pump filter, I don't know, wherever the water sits in a bus, it's not always the cleanest water. And you don't know if sometimes that bus is coming from another tour. It could have been sitting in a garage for months. Like, you don't know how fresh that water is. Basically, it's just a general rule. Don't do it. It's not worth it. So what you'll always see, at least the bus tours I've done, the front lounge area, there's like a bunch of drawers underneath the seats, and those are usually full of plastic water bottles. Now, I hate plastic water bottles as much as the next person, but unfortunately, you just have to use those. And I'm talking even just brushing your teeth and stuff like that. Like, you don't want to drink that water because you don't know what's in it. You just don't know. It's meant for the toilet, which doesn't flush anything, and that's about it. All right, so some other general rules. For those who haven't even been on a bus, there is a front lounge, then there's what's called bunk alley, and then there's a back lounge. At least these are the North American buses, I should add. I think the European ones are different. I'm sure tours vary, but my experience, the front lounge is kind of like the party hangout zone. Like, you can be loud, you can play Mario Kart, you can watch movies. Like, I say party lightly because I've never been on a crew that parties a lot. But that's just kind of where you hang out and you can like yell and be loud and do whatever you want. And then bunk alley is like the sacred zone. Okay, you do not make noise in bunk alley unless you are confident, and I mean absolutely confident, like all the bunk curtains are open and nobody's on there. You do not make noise. You just don't. And then there's the back lounge. The back lounge is a little more of the chill zone. Like, if you want to go take a private phone call, or if you are decompressing after a show and you just want to be left alone. So if somebody's in there, unless you need to go back there for something, you kind of just leave them. And then bunk alley too, when someone's in their bunk, unless it's an absolute emergency, you don't bother them. Like, I think there's only been one time where our TM was like, hey, you in there? They didn't open my curtain, but he was just like, are you in there? Because he saw me talking on the phone outside and we were about to leave for an overnight drive, and he was just making sure. But other than that, I've never been disturbed in my bunk. If you're late for like load-in or something, I think you probably would get bothered, but just like a sacred rule, because when you're on tour, there's just not a lot of privacy in general. So somebody's curtain being closed in their bunk is basically just saying, leave me alone. And you have to respect that. Some other fun facts, you sleep with your head facing the back. So your head always has to go towards the back of the bus. Because basically when you brake, so say there's an accident or something, you're driving, you're sleeping, and the bus brakes really heavily, you don't want your head smashing into the wall. At least that way your feet will go first and you'll break an ankle and not your neck. And then, yeah, other than that, I think just basic etiquette, like if the vibe is quiet, don't be that person coming in there yelling at everybody. But I feel like that's just like a tour etiquette thing. Oh, and one thing I did have to kind of take into consideration, I didn't learn the hard way, thankfully, but if you're driving overnight and say the bus driver stops to get gas, whatever it is, if you're going to get off that bus to go to the washroom or whatever reason, always let the bus driver know. Because if you think about it, if you're on the bus, he takes off to drive, he stops for gas, comes back on, he's just going to keep going. So I know some tours that do it where you leave like your laminate or your keys on the bus seat, like on the driver's seat, so they know. Sometimes, honestly, if I just saw them, I would just tell them. But yeah, just a general rule of thumb, don't get off the bus when you're driving and the bus driver doesn't know. Now, like I said, bus tours, a little more glamorous. You have some space. If you're lucky and you're not a full bus, you'll have what's called a junk bunk, so you can like throw your backpacks up there and stuff. Sometimes it's a full bus and you have to throw everything in the back lounge, which isn't as spacious. I find both van and bus tours are good and bad in different ways. Like, I I like the van tours for seeing the country because we had to do a lot of the drives ourselves. And I actually got to see like us driving through the mountains and us driving through the desert. And you're actually awake and conscious for a lot of that. Whereas bus tours, if you have a TM that loves you, you will be doing 90% of the drives overnight, which is good because you're well rested. You don't have to sit for 8 hours, besides for the fact, like I just said, that you don't get to see anything. But as nice as it is to sleep overnight, I will say my body, especially this last tour, for some reason, my body was so confused on where we were in the time zone we were in. I don't know why. I just found like, I think there were 3 days in a row. We just did really long drives overnight, like 8+ hours. And we traveled like halfway across the country in 3 days, but I was sleeping. So I would just wake up and I'm like, oh, I'm like in a completely different time zone. And I just find like your body gets a little bit confused because you just don't like acknowledge that you've been traveling. Now, you could be one of those people that just doesn't sleep well on a bus and maybe you do acknowledge it, but I sleep like a baby. Like, especially when the bus is moving, I love long drives overnight. Like, I find if we are staying somewhere and our bus call isn't till 4, like we don't start leaving till 4 a.m. I almost sleep better the second the bus turns on. I don't know, it just like rocks you to sleep. I know not everybody is like that, but thankfully I am. The other nice thing about being on a bus, and I'm gonna touch on this more in a bit, but you kind of keep all your belongings in one space. Like, yes, you are still traveling across the country, but you have one thing that's consistent. Because I find when you're in van tours, yeah, you've got your suitcase and stuff on there. But like personally, I would never want to leave my camera or my laptop on the van just because I'd be so scared of someone like stealing it, breaking in. I've been on tours where other bands have gotten broken into in their vans, where the bus is a lot more secure. Now you do get hotel rooms sometimes, once again, depending on the tour, but like it's nice because you can take some of your stuff into the hotel where you can leave some of it on the bus. It doesn't really matter. Or you can always go back to the bus and get it if it's just sitting in the parking lot. Like it's just so nice to have, like, it literally is your home. All right, now that I feel like I've talked your ears off on buses, because you guys are probably like, I don't care about the bus that much. Okay, let's talk about the schedule of a tour. So I'm just gonna go off of my last tour, just as an example. Keep in mind, times of this can change. It's not just black and white. It really depends on the tour. I'm going to keep saying that. I just have to. My last tour load-in was 11 a.m., sometimes 10, but usually 11. So we'd get in 11, around 11:30 would be what's called load-in. So that's when you start bringing all your gear into the venue and start unloading and setting it up, essentially. So I was doing merch and sometimes photos on my last tour. I will say my primary job was merch, but I've also done tours as a photographer. So I kind of want to go on what both of those jobs look like on tour. So yeah, I would come into the venue 11. I would scout out where the merch is going to be. I would scout out where the green rooms are, where if there's any like cool spots in the venue, say if I want to take photos of the band, do all that fun stuff. And then load in would start. So my returns, which is the merch that comes back from the night before, is always at the back of the truck. So that stuff would come out first. I would bring it to the merch stand and I would start doing as much as I could. So I would start like, I would always recount it. I have a habit of just like counting things like 800 times just to make sure they're right. I'd recount. I would set up the merch as much as I could. And then usually on my radio, I'd get a call being like, hey, truck is tipped, which means all the stuff that's on the truck has now been loaded into the venue and I can now reach the merch that's at the back of the truck. So the merch at the back of the truck is basically all my overstock. So I would go in and I would pull what I needed for the next show. Obviously, I sold some at the last show, so everything I'm bringing in is probably not enough. So I'd go to the back of the truck, I'd bring in what I needed, and then sometimes there'd be a loading dock, so I could just leave the trailer open. In the cases that there weren't, I would let everybody know, like, hey, I'm done with the truck. Sometimes they would need to put the ramp back in. If the ramp is already back in, then I could just lock up the truck, and that was that. And just pray I don't need to get back into it, because it's annoying when you do have to. I would usually stock enough where I wouldn't have to, just because I didn't like going into the truck at night, especially when there's no loading dock and I'm kind of there by myself and there's like people on the street walking by. It always kind of freaked me out a little bit. So I pulled out my merch. I would now do the ads. I will put that into my inventory and I will set it up all nice and pretty. Everything's great. My merch is now set up. First, now at the beginning of the tour, I was a little bit slow on this just because you're starting to kind of get your bearings, figuring out what works. And then once you kind of get the hang of it, I would usually take from between pulling merch, which would always take the longest because I have to dig some of it out because I don't have that much space in the truck. It would take me from like 11:30 to, I want to say like 2 p.m. Sometimes it'd be 1 p.m. if I was like really speedy that day, but usually around 2. And then I'd have to start setting up for VIP. So I'd build out some laminates. Once I was done at 2, that's usually when I kind of would take my first like lunch break. When you're on tour, you have what's called a rider, which is basically like each venue gives you a hospitality budget. The venue will go pick up a bunch of food and drinks or whatever you put on your rider essentially. So you give them a list. In this case, we had a lot of like deli meats and sandwiches and stuff. So I would go make my lunch out of that just because it was easy. I would eat something and then I would go in and I would check in the VIP guests because that was the next part of my day. So I'd check them in. I would lead them all in, do the Q&A, lead them in for the photos. Once I got the photo, I would sell merch to the VIP people and then they would go back outside. When they were back outside, it is now, I want to say like 5:30-ish usually, depending on how many there were. So now I have from 5:30 to 6:30 when doors are for my dinner break. So then I would have to do my best to find a good dinner. There were a few times I just ended up Uber Eatsing some stuff just because it was easier and there was nothing around. Most days we were around a lot of different restaurants, so that was good. So yeah, I'd go grab a quick bite, usually with some of the crew guys because they like to eat early. And then usually around 6:20, I would aim to be back to the venue, turn on all my readers and my credit card machines, make sure everything is good to go, and doors would open and I would sell. It really depends on the show, but I would sell usually for 1 to 2 hours straight. There was usually be a decent line. And then once that's done, now we can think about photography. Now, I want to emphasize that the last tour I did, the photography was not actually my primary job and we actually had a photographer. I just like to shoot for fun. I have toured as a photographer and I want to talk about that schedule too. But this is the schedule of somebody doing both. So yeah, I want to stress that I did not have to take photos because my day sounds so chaotic now that I'm saying it out loud. And I don't want you guys to think that somebody gave me all those jobs and I was overworked because I was not. I am just a bit of a workaholic. So once the merch line was dead, there would be other sellers for the opening band. So usually somebody was around the merch table so I could leave it. Band goes on. I would take photos during their set. I usually would come back, like I kind of pick a song, like 3 songs before the end. I would come back to the merch table. I would export those photos onto my hard drive where I would start editing them and then the line would start coming because now the show's over. I'd finish selling merch, I would count out my merch and then I would settle. The show would usually end around, I literally can't remember, I think it was like 10:45 or 11 p.m. I'm sure somebody on here can correct me. The show would usually end around 11. I would finish selling by 11:30. I would wrap up around midnight. I would then go settle with our tour manager. So we would just talk some number stuff. Once that was done and all my merch was like loaded in a nice dolly and I knew it was going to be brought to the trailer or sometimes I would bring it to the trailer, I would then go onto the bus and I would finish editing my photos. I would upload those into Dropbox and I would send them along their way. Usually this wrapped up around, I want to say like 1:30. I didn't edit the night of every night because I do need to sleep. But that is kind of a general look onto my last tour run. Now, I didn't shoot every show, I will say, but if I were to, that is what the day looked like. The tours I've done where I've just been a photographer, I would still show up for load-in because I am a keener and I would scout out some cool spots. Usually around sound check is when the band arrives. So they do their fun little sound check. If there is VIP, it's usually after sound check. Either way, the band is in the venue. You can go around, take some portraits with them, get any content you need. Usually you try and come in with a list and prepared because the band's got to eat dinner. They want to relax before a show. You don't want to go in wasting anyone's time. So you come in prepared, do the content, whatever you need with them. Around like 30-40 minutes before their set time, that's usually when the band kind of starts getting ready. I'd go in, take some like pre-show photos, getting ready photos. This part really depends on the band's comfortability with the camera. Like, do they want to be photographed, getting ready? You also just have to read the room in general, just because like, yeah, if they're just fixing their hair, that's a cool shot. If they're like getting changed, like don't go in there, like don't be a weirdo. So definitely, use some common sense there. But yeah, band gets ready, you take some photos, you take like a pre-show photo usually, and then they go on stage, you shoot the whole show. Once it's done, go right to the bus or van and start editing, send those off ASAP. Like I would try and get those done and like an hour after they're off stage because they're going to want to share those photos. They're going to be like, thank the city, all that fun stuff. And then off days as a photographer, so days where there's no show. If you're doing anything fun, definitely take your camera, take photos. Like the last tour I did, we did like a go-karting day. So I just took my small point and shoot and I just took photos of us having fun, just kind of stuff like that, because the whole point of having a tour photographer is to get those cool moments, not just on stage, but like fans want to feel like they're part of the tour and that they're seeing behind the scenes kind of stuff. So that part I think is super important. And this really is like, is based off the band you're working for. Like some bands don't want any content like that. You really have to kind of see what kind of photos they usually post. Do they post a lot of videos? You really have to make up basically like a content plan based on their needs. And that is going to depict what your schedule looks like on tour. All in all of this rambling to say that your day-to-day schedule on tour will look different depending on the role you are in, but whatever that schedule is, it is honestly the same thing every day. Like it really is. So it's kind of funny because I got into touring because I didn't want a 9 to 5, and touring is almost the same. You're just in a different venue. There's some days you're so busy you don't even leave the venue, so you might as well just be the same office space because everything kind of feels the same after a while. That's not to say I don't love it. I do think it is more exciting than a 9 to 5, but I think a lot of people think tour is this like rock and roll lifestyle and it's so cool and so different. It's like, honestly, you are doing the same thing every single day. Now, is it fun? Yes. But also I find the tours I've done have been super fun because of the people I was with. I've also heard horror stories. I think tour can be either a fantastic time or the worst time. I actually have been on both ends of that. I will say the last couple years, the tours I have done, it's been a phenomenal crew and phenomenal band, and that makes such a difference. Which kind of brings me to my next topic of like what tour is like emotionally. I remember, I don't even know who said this to me, but there was one person that said to me that while you're on tour, life at home continues moving while you don't. And that is probably the best, most accurate way I've ever heard touring described as, because when you're on tour, every day is the same. You're with the same people. You are doing the same thing every day. You have one goal every day. Yes, you have off days and things, do change, but essentially for like the month you were gone, this is your role. This is your job. This is what you do. And then everybody at home is just continuing on. They're still going to friends' birthday parties and weddings and traveling different spots. Now, I'm not saying that everyone's going to leave you behind, but I will say you do have relationships that suffer because you are gone for so long. And I think touring is the easiest when you are with a really solid group of people, because when you think about it, you have to spend so much time with this group of people to the point when you stop tour, when tour ends, I find a lot of people kind of get into this weird post-tour depression because you've just spent a month with these people developing these really strong bonds. You see them every day, and now like chances are they all live in different cities. So now you're home, you're sitting at home, you're like, okay, now what? And all these people are in the same boat but in different spots. So it's kind of a weird emotional roller coaster. I know last year was the first tour I did where I was in a serious relationship, and that was definitely a different vibe than tours I've done before. I found I was more homesick, and it's weird because I was having the time of my life. It was a great tour. It was one of the bigger tours I've ever done. I loved everybody I worked with, but a piece of my heart was at home, and I struggled with that. And then too, there's sometimes you'll be traveling and people you love back home are going through a tough time and you can't be there. So I think that's one downside of touring that a lot of people kind of like just to gloss over. And I think that's something that people need to consider when they're looking at starting to tour, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's not all glamorous and parties and whatever. Like it's tiring. If you don't sleep well in different beds or on a bus or anything, like you're gonna be tired. You're gonna be tired regardless. But if you're one of those people that need like their bed, like good luck. The food you eat is not always going to be the best. Sometimes you're rushing to get food. The options you have or whatever is in the area that you're staying in at the time. Good luck eating healthy. You can try, but honestly, no matter what, I find restaurant food's just not as healthy as cooking at home because there's just added oils, butters, whatever. Like I'm not going to get into it, but just eating out is never as nutritional as when you cook it yourself and you're homesick. So I'm not trying to discourage anyone from touring, but I do think that's something that people need to talk about. And even on this last tour specifically, I saw a lot of like ads, or I don't even know what to call them. I saw like ads for like companies that help with mental health when you're on the road posted backstage at a lot of venues. And I'm like, okay, so people are starting to kind of acknowledge that this is a thing. Now, I do love tour. I'm not going to say I don't want to do it. But I will say I tour less now than I used to, and I'm very happy with that because I am now, getting married, and I want to be home. I want to see my husband. I don't want to be away from my friends and my family and everything as much as I used to. When I was 23, like even looking back at doing the van tours where I slept on a bench and whatnot, 30-year-old Kelsey does not have it in her like 23-year-old Kelsey did. Like I don't regret it, and I'm so happy I had those days. Like I have some of the best memories of like camping on these beautiful campgrounds in like California, but I, for for the life of me could not do that today. And the same goes with just touring 8 months of the year. Like I don't have it in me anymore. Like I'll do 1 to 2 months, but I enjoy my life at home. And it's kind of funny even just saying that out loud, because I never thought that would be something I would admit to. I used to think touring was the best thing in the world. And like I said, I still love it. I don't want to go on too much of a tangent because I'm still very, very content. And I think the people I do tour with now, I'm very intentional in who I agree to tour with now, because I want the best experience. I don't want to tour with a band that I don't know that well, and I don't know if I'm going to have a good time, because I just value my time more, I guess. But yeah, I don't want to end this on a bad, sad note. So let's talk about the joys of touring. You do develop very strong relationships with people. Like I have very amazing, talented friends now that I knew before. I actually knew a lot of them before I started touring with them. But now I obviously know them better. I have so many amazing memories. I've seen every single state except Hawaii and Alaska, which, those are harder to get to, okay? So I'm working on it. But I've seen every other state, which I think is so cool. And I am so blessed. As somebody that loves to travel, I'm very proud of that accomplishment. I'm so grateful for my love of music, because let's be honest, it's probably what even brought me to my now soon-to-be husband, because we are both in the music industry. Just looking back and seeing how much of my life has been shaped by music and traveling and all of that is just so crazy to think about. I feel like it also gave me more of a backbone and a lot more confidence, because I have done tours where I was not treated properly. And while I maybe should have said more back then, I know for sure now I wouldn't tolerate those things. And I do think if you are a photographer and you want to get on the road, I definitely would say go for it. I just kind of want to paint a more realistic picture that it's not a jolly good time all the time. It's got its ups and downs. Overall, I think it's fantastic, and it's something I'm never going to regret. And I hope I didn't go on too much of a tangent talking about this. I just feel very passionate about actually opening people's eyes. And I think it does go back to when I was, 19. I moved to a new city, and when I wanted to work in music, I know I got a lot of backlash, not necessarily from my parents, but just in general from some people in my small town, all those words that you hear as a young woman. So I'm very passionate on letting people know that no, tour is a job. And yes, it's a different job. And yeah, you are going to go to Red Lobster twice in one day, some days, but it's still a job. And while I'm sure there are tours out there that are a lot more party central, it doesn't need to be, and it can be very professional and just a fun, reliable career. So thank you guys for listening to my tangent. If you guys have any specific questions on tour, anything I didn't answer, please let me know. Like I said, I'm very passionate about talking about the ins and outs of touring and being on the road, because how else are you gonna know? Thank you guys, and I will see you in the next episode.